What's up, everybody? Most restoration business owners assume that growth means rapid expansion, more trucks, more employees, more locations. But real success isn't always about getting bigger. It's about building a business that serves both your professional and your personal goals. In this episode, we're going to break down why smart, sustainable growth beats reckless scaling every time.
Boom. Hey, Toby, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, man?
Not much, man. This is a big one, isn't it? I think we say that on every episode. These are all common conversations that we have with everybody, right?
Yeah. Yep.
It's
the reason why we do what we do.
I wrote some notes down here that specifically speaks to this one. There's one story keeping the company obscure, of course. It was in the Northeast in Jersey, New York area. Several $1 million in annual revenue, full service reconstruction and mitigation as well. He was huge program guy on Contractor Connection for a very, very long time. And they just kind of kept scaling to get bigger. But their business, they had to scale to get bigger because the overhead was growing. And the only way to outrun that was to get bigger and bigger. So he chased the size. And then he wanted to think about what would it look like to sell and get a valuation on my business. And he got a quick valuation from somebody and didn't like what he heard. And so he called me and I went up and spent 4 days and went through the business. Come to find out he had, just terrible single digit margin and just wasn't worth it to him to sell the company. And so he had chased this bigger, but he told me he remembered being at X at like 8 million and remembering it just was way more profitable then. So this is very, very, very big contrasting story. I'm sure you've got some stories like that too.
Yeah, I was going to say on the flip side, we've got a client that we worked with who came to us when they were fairly small, and built strategically. He'd been in business before. He'd been a contractor in other industries, and he knew exactly how to grow a contracting business. It's just that all the other complexities of restoration was really kind of clouding his vision. So we were able to get some of that straightened out, get him aligned, back in line with his vision and his experience. And he was able to stay fairly lean. Actually, he was able to stay very lean, fairly small, service the area pretty close to their shop and serve it well. And, we just got the call, 2 months ago now. And he's like, guys, I did it. I sold and I got the number that I was looking for. And that was just a matter of 2 years that he was able to, clean the windshield off, so to speak, put the systems in place that he needed, get as profitable as he needed to get the number, the multiplier that he was looking for. And now he's into his forever home, so to speak. They moved into his forever home, probably quite literally sipping margaritas as we record this podcast. So,
probably so.
That's just a complete at the other end of the spectrum of the story that you told, where he ran lean and mean and extremely profitable. So, to the point, it's not about more trucks. It's not necessarily about more employees, more locations. It's about figuring out what it is that you want out of your life, out of your business, and just build to that.
As of recording this, next week I'm headed to the RIA. We're actually in conference season. Toby, I was in Florida last 2 weeks ago for the experience. Okay. And what's very common is when you get an area, when you get a convention center full of contractors, and this is probably not just in the blue collar world, but the first question is everyone asks, how big are you? What's your revenue? How many trucks do you have? You mentioned trucks, blah, blah, blah. And that's just the first question, because there is a common misconception that bigger means better. I know from my history that bigger wasn't always better. I knew a sweet spot, and I now know we coach to a sweet spot. When people say I want to get to 14 to 15 million, we have to, and I know I do and you do. Let me tell you what that looks like, feels like, tastes like, smells like. That's going to not be the life you want. It's going to be the business you think you need. When you start talking about valuation of selling, multipliers of X, I mean, you've got to ask yourself, how much do I really need? I'm a big fan of keeping a business. Now, it's hard to stay the same size, so we have to preface this. But the truth is, more revenue is certainly not more profit. More revenue, and anyone listening to this will probably have some nods of the head. I know several people that sold to M&A and to private equity because they got to a next level, and they said, this has become my life, and this is not fun anymore, and I don't feel connected to it. I don't even know all the people walking around here, do employees every day, and et cetera. More problems, more money, more problems, right? So maybe we can bust that out today. But what I heard from you is, obviously your story of yours was, instead of chasing it, letting it come to them, but they designed it reverse. Like, what do I want the business to be? And then what's the structure of the system and the scale? What are the levers of the airplane? I often talk about the airplane. I mean, how much yaw, how much fuel, and instead of just rushing for nothing.
Well, I think actually what he did first, he engineered it in reverse, but he started with what he wanted out of life. He was an older guy. He was already he was planning for retirement. So he knew, and not only was he planning for retirement, him and his wife have specific things that they do and they enjoy that the business needed to contribute to. So he wasn't chasing a massive company in order to get the money. He was building a business that supported his life. So I think we should be careful to not say that big business is bad.
No.
I think we need to, we can't overemphasize enough that design your life and then design the business to support the life. If you don't really want, let's say you're okay being gone 3 weeks out of the month, right? To have multiple locations across the country and traveling all the time, and missing important dates with the family, not being home every night for dinner. If you're bootstrapping a multiple location business, you're going to have to be on the road quite a bit. Now, if you're buying a business that's already established and there's already some infrastructure in place and you can manage from afar, great, that's fine. But it's important to be very, very clear on what your personal goals are first, and then design the business to support it. So
yeah, I agree.
Big business isn't bad business. And I just want to reiterate that. Like, some people want big business and they can build a big business, and the big business can support their life all the same. That's fine. But when we hear that and we start asking questions, our ideal client typically is like, nah, personal life is very important to us, and we want the business to support it.
Yeah. Before we kick off into the rest of it, I want to say that, and I agree with you. I know some big business. I know a $750 million a year company. If you're going to scale like that, you had better have great team building skills. Because again, I would say the solo entrepreneur, the owner operator model will be okay up until 3 to 5. And after that, it becomes your life. And then it relies on how well can you build a team. You mentioned infrastructure, the systems that go along. Just people isn't going to be enough. And so I agree. Big business isn't bad, but more times than not, when we hear people say what they want to grow their business for, it's not to have a big business, it's to have the life. And then I get what you're saying now. So
yeah.
Let's talk about, I guess we can call them myths, the myths of scaling that we think that hurts business owners.
Yeah, I think that's good. Cause that kind of ties into what I was saying, that there's this, well, the myth could go either way, really. The myth is that you need more business to have more money. Or the myth could be like, you don't need to grow a business, very big. The key is, what is it that you want out of life? That's the key. You've got to start there. So, but yeah, I agree. One of them is that more revenue equals more profit. And man, did I learn that hard lesson when I first was getting started.
Yeah.
More revenue does not mean more profit. There's an expense to more revenue.
Yeah. The story "Leaders Eat Last" by Simon Sinek is never more true when you're in scale mode. So any profits coming in don't go to your bank. They go back into the company, and you're still, I need another person. I need to hire a marketing company. I need to hire an ops manager. But no, the reality is more jobs, I call it, is financial obligation. You have just committed to doing more. And again, it's more supplies, more equipment, buying a pallet of equipment because you now have more jobs than you used to. So that extra 30,000 that you had that could have gone towards a boat, that now is for more equipment, and it has to come from somewhere. So more jobs don't equal necessarily more profit margin. Now, if you're really, really in tight with your margins and knowing that I'm scaling now, but I also don't believe, and I know, Toby, this comes up a lot, just because your overhead grows doesn't mean you charge the public and the customer more. No business would scale well that way. You can scale, you can raise your prices based on, quality of products, and in a restaurant from, the quality of the food and things like that, serviceability. But in a service company, just because you grow to be 5 locations doesn't mean you can be 5 times more expensive. And I think some people juggle with, how do I stay in? And again, that's where systems come in. How do I scale and use that profit that I have on those jobs to keep my price points low and to keep my overhead lower? But I think a lot of people mess it up right there. Their overhead grows. They get, and we've got a couple of things here that we're going to talk about, but when you start growing, you know where that profit goes, right, Toby? Middle management. You start needing to add those layers that they are not necessarily applicable to a job. What else is in the revenue profit world? What am I missing?
Well, I mean, for me, it all tied back to that old saying that we always go back to, that revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king.
That's right.
I had a goal in my mind that I wanted my business to be at a certain point at the end of the year. And I was at that point, again, I was still one guy in a truck. So I had some flexibility, shall we say, but I was willing to achieve that goal at all costs. And I literally used those words in my head. And I said, I don't care what it costs me. I want to hit that goal. And I did. I hit that goal, but it cost me a ton in marketing. It cost me a ton in time. And it cost me quite a bit in terms of sacrificing with, family events and things like that, because I was so determined to get to that goal. So it's kind of a trap if you're chasing that top line revenue, but losing on the back end, because at the end of the day, another way to put it is, how much are you willing to lose, or how much, or would you be willing to pay to go work at someone's house? No business person in their right mind wants to pay the client to go work at the house, or the property, whatever the case may be. So you've got to turn a profit. They need to be giving you enough money that you can pay your bills. Otherwise, it's for naught. So don't fall into the trap of chasing that top line number. At the end of the day, it's about what's in the bank. The cash. Cash is king.
And anyone listening to this, if you don't believe us, go ask somebody else that you look up to in the industry that has scaled, and ask them where the hidden costs were, and they will tell you. They'll tell you, slow down here, watch out for equipment, payroll, insurance. I'm hearing a lot of people complain about the cost of insurance when you scale to a certain size, and if you can even get it. A lot of people are really having a hard time getting, especially for mold and things like that. So more revenue into jobs. And then lastly on the jobs, Toby, when you start having to go outside of your service area and travel further, well, that's inefficient. So you're starting to, the guys and gals are now on the road for an hour and a half, 2 hours. You've got maybe, staying overnight there, burning out people, more turnover. So just watch that trap. Another myth. What do you think about that? Bigger businesses are better?
More employees will make things easier.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
Hiring too fast is going to lead to bad culture, poor accountability, inefficiency, like all those things. If you don't have the systems in place before you scale, oh man, we see it obviously in the work that we do. We see it all the time where people just hire warm bodies and they don't have the systems in place. They don't really even know they don't even know the identity, and this is where the coachy BSery kind of comes into play. They don't even know the identity of the organization so that they can try to hire people with aligned values. And when you don't have aligned values with people, you're going to have internal conflict, and that's just going to kill your culture. There's going to be no accountability per se. You're going to be extremely inefficient, and you're going to start seeing a lot more 1 and 2 star reviews. So
sure, and you're going to have turnover. The
Yep.
good staff that you do have, they don't want to work with. There's some people they can work with, but when it's going so fast and your managers are having to be technicians all the time on jobs. I was on the phone before we had this with someone that's hosting our event in about 3 weeks, and they are so busy that people is a problem. And he's like, I'm really worried that when we get in this crunch, we usually rush to hire and we can't find the right people when we have to hire to get jobs done. He goes, it's a real slippery, dangerous thing to grow beyond what you can do, because you bring on people that you don't plan to have long term, and that just equals a lot of things. But more important, and then you said it, Toby, more employees aren't better. Sometimes you could probably be more efficient with processes. You don't necessarily need more people. You just need the people doing the right work the first time and in the right order, and not everybody touching it. So
that's absolutely the case. Yep.
Sometimes I think it feels like throwing more people at it. And the rest of your team may say, we're overwhelmed, we need more people. What they're saying is, we're doing stuff the hard way and I can't do any more because I'm out of capacity. That's not the same thing saying this is more than one person could do. What they're saying is, this is more than one person can do the way we're doing it.
Exactly.
So let's look at that. And again, document the processes. I think when you document it, you can look at it on paper and say, no wonder it's so hard. 3 people are touching this job and doing the same thing. There's overlap, and then no one's doing this part. And that's where we're dropping the ball. And we're spending 2/3 of our time on the customer service side trying to make up for it. So it really becomes what I call a process pretzel. Things are just all twisting around. But,
well, even before you document the processes, which I 1,000% agree should happen in every organization. Even before that, though, you've got to have clearly defined roles. Otherwise, you have multiple people that are just trying to plug holes in your organization. And at the end of the day, that's just inefficient.
Yeah.
But it comes from either a lack of clarity on the roles or leadership that is afraid to hold people accountable. One of those two things generally is true. So if we can fix one or both of those things, then the efficiency goes up rapidly. So,
well, let's not ignore that. How do I want to put this? And I agree with everything you're saying, is the team you have in place. If you're growing, if you're lucky enough to have a lead gen system and a great influx of jobs coming in, relatively consistency, if you're not hiring right, the team you have are so busy doing the work that they can't with identifying the roles and the documentation. So everyone's so busy being busy that they can't stop being busy to slow down. And that's a runway of troubles. But I agree with you. That's a myth. More employees don't make things easier. They can oftentimes make it worse. And you'll see different problems, and they'll splinter off into different things.
Well, we've seen it many times where, somebody will call us saying either they need more people or they just need help to get clarity. We spend 2 days with them on site talking with their leadership team. we sort a few things out, and all of a sudden they're like, huh,
Yeah.
we actually have more people than we actually need.
Yeah.
But it's just come from disorganization and a lack of clarity. So,
Well, also, before we skip to the next myth, you talk about having the right people. Maybe you have people doing jobs that we shouldn't be doing in the restoration space anyway, as contractors. Maybe we're doing way too much claims management and we're doing too much insurance stuff, that we have people on staff, probably on the administrative level. Maybe you're offloading that onto your project manager, which is hurting downstream. Maybe we're just doing a lot of the wrong work that we shouldn't be doing. So if you feel like you're relating to some of what we're saying, ask yourself, what would it look like if you had the customer can fight for themselves. You can document it. You're supposed to document your jobs, but the back and forth with the carrier, you have a personal staff that does nothing but call and tries to find the payment. What if that didn't exist? And I mean, maybe Sally or Billy in the office is a great person. You like them, but I bet they could do something else. They probably don't like doing collections. So we're talking about having more employees. Maybe it's just having the right number, doing the right things, and you'll be really lean. You're talking about your contractor in Texas. Man, there's nothing like being lean, but no one feels like they're overworked. Everyone feels like they're doing the exact right thing. It's a good one.
Yep.
I know this next one, Toby. I want to take this one. I had a business. So the myth is more locations means that we're going to have more market share. I was in Houston, Texas, and I expanded at one time to Austin and San Antonio, which aren't geographically, they're both about 2 hours. It really just spread everyone further, thinner. We started borrowing. Austin got real busy. We started taking people from Houston. The business in Houston didn't slow down. We were still busy, so we were shorthanded. Overhead grew because we were going through more temporary services and more outside labor and stuff like that. So I thought that another location, even when I was in the dry cleaning industry before this, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, we had multiple locations, and it just never landed on the P&L as more that we made more money. It was probably more than anything, Toby. I think the ego, whatever line item, cell number 14B, that was ego. The ego number was good. But that was no multiplier on that. But I fell into that trap. We thought more locations. No location, you just find the one, optimize. Which one's doing the best? Where do you serve the kind of customers you want? And what, how much time do you want to spend on the road? Houston traffic, we were spending so much time. Everybody was just, we got to drive to Austin. It was an hour and a half, but gosh, depending on traffic, it might've been 4 hours, and it just took forever to get there. And then the people that were out there, we didn't have consistent enough work. So what you end up doing, and we have a client in Kentucky that had 2 locations. They did not have enough consistent work, and they were pulling people from the primary to go platoon out there. And then again, that just caused more people at home base to be stranded, or, to not stranded, but people at home base to be stretched too thin. Then we were like, let's don't go out and sell more work because we're shorthanded. Or we're shorthanded because we tried to open another location that's not self-supporting. Those are some of the things I did. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I worked with a client in North Carolina that had the same thing. They tried to open a location that was I think it was around 2 hours away, and they would have to send guys over and spend the night for a couple of nights of the week. And, they didn't mind it for a while, but after a few months of it, they're like, man, this isn't what we signed up for. We didn't sign up to be traveling restorers. We don't mind helping the company out, but this is becoming a regular thing. So they ended up stretching their home team out way too thin, trying to cover because they couldn't hire, or they couldn't justify to hire. And the one person that they did hire ended up, screwing them. So, it just became a whole mess. But it kind of goes into the whole the metaphor of growing your roots deep before you grow them wide. Saturate your market, the current market that you have, and squeeze every dollar out of that market, but also squeeze every ounce of profitability out of that market also before you scale. before you add another location. Get really good with your systems and processes so that every dollar you bring in is extremely profitable. Then you can take that model and replicate it. But if you haven't figured those things out and you try to duplicate in another market that's, an hour, 2 hours away, we haven't seen it be very successful without getting home base taken care of first.
Yeah, I was watching a interesting case study, a little a video, and it says outside of our realm, but this guy had a vending machine business, and I know that's not what we do, but he was up to 125 vending machines. He was doing about 150,000 a month in revenue. Obviously, that's not cost. His thing was because he would go to a new property, whether it be an urgent care, apartment building, student housing, whatever. He didn't buy a machine and make the investment until he had a commitment and a signed contract or a signed agreement with the property. So he didn't go out and buy it. It's the old baseball, if you build it, they will come. If you build it, it doesn't mean they will come. When I was working with a client, Toby, in around 2015 and 16, they were on a fast growth. They're now probably 100 million, but we were expanding up from Florida into the Southeast. But there were a few times things that had to happen before we would move to a new, like to Charlotte or to Birmingham. The revenue had to be here, the profit, you mentioned that. We have to be, consistent for 3 quarters before we can move to a new one. And then we had to have our current clients give us referrals for sister properties or cousin properties or whatever in those markets. So we didn't go there until we knew that we could hit the ground and possibly be seeing some revenue and try to be, in the black within the 1 to 2 months. But if we were struggling in Atlanta, then we didn't move to Birmingham until we got Atlanta squared away, because you're not going to take that cancer and duplicate it and put it somewhere else because something's not working. So more locations weren't great. Some locations were duds. I mean, I remember we moved to Raleigh from there and never took off. I don't remember what made us move there too quick, but found out in 6 months of losing a whole lot of money. Probably lost about $400,000 in 6 months from just overhead and people and costs and stuff. So definitely that's a big myth that more locations equal that. Now, I know a lot of people listening here are not necessarily thinking about new locations. But at some point someone's going to ask you, especially if you start doing commercial, hey, can you help us so-and-so? Just remember this conversation, that there have to be a lot of things, a lot of boxes have to be checked before that makes more sense. Otherwise, if it's a one-off job, just go do it and charge them to go and do that, remotely in hotel per diem and things like that.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep. Well, we've developed a system that really works, that we've seen work. 3-step process. It's actually pretty straightforward. You put the structure in place. Once you've got the structure in place, then you can build the systems. And once you have the systems in place, then you can scale. That kind of goes back to the client that I was referring to in North Carolina. They tried to scale before they had the systems in place and had built habits around those systems. And if you don't even have the systems and you try to scale, you probably don't have the structure in place either. So it goes one way and it doesn't go in reverse, meaning system. If you've got to start with the structure, you've got to set the foundation, then you build the systems on the foundation, then you can scale. Structure is just that. You've got to define and I talked about it earlier, defining your business identity, the values, the purpose, the mission, things along those lines. Then you've got to really step back and ask yourself, and this, again, we stated this earlier too. What are the personal goals that you have as the owner or the leader of the organization? In some cases, our audience, there's GMs and things that have autonomy to run the business. But what are the personal goals? What are the expectations that you have for your family, for your life, and how can your business complement that? So set realistic growth targets. How much is enough? And then a stretch goal, some would call it. I would say, how much is too much? Know the lifestyle that you want. Do you want to hand the business off? Do you want to stay involved? Because listen, a lot of the restorers, they love the work. It's all the other things that they struggle with. So many of the folks that we work with, they want to be involved on a regular basis. They enjoy talking to the clients. They enjoy being involved with their people and helping their people grow as humans. So each owner or each leader has to really define what those things are for themselves, and then figure out how the business can complement it.
Well, Toby, we're not immune to this. So we've done all our own structure. What kind of business do we want to give us the kind of life we want? And where we are now, I coach very little with clients. There's parts of me that miss, and I feel detached, but I'm working on different parts of the business. But there's a point where you're going to have to get comfortable doing different things in your company. If you're the owner, if you're the leader, you're going to move into the CEO role. We talk about WRT to CEO. Yeah. You don't want to stay in WRT, or you would like to if it meant you could make CEO money. Those things just don't usually go hand in hand. But I have scaled, we're not a huge company, but I'm now doing different things. I'm required to do different tasks, which mean I don't do the things I used to do, which were far more comfortable because they were easier for me. Now I'm doing uncomfortable things. And we see that really being an issue with a lot of people. But without Toby, you and I, and those on our team, we know what we're trying to get to. It makes the challenges that we face scaling easier because we remind ourselves that we can't get to that lifestyle with our wives and our families and our kids and the places we want to go and the things we want to do, the books we want to write. We can't do those things until we do these, and that just makes it a little bit easier. So the structure is 100%. The structure also, you and I had breakfast the other day, and new client, you have got to define what kind of customers you want so you don't get customers you don't want. Because everybody listening to this, if you're in the restoration disaster business, we now understand how important onboarding is and what kind of clients are going to be great clients and which ones aren't going to be so great and going to leave us with either a lot of extra admin stuff on the side or even not getting paid. You've got to define what those people look like, what they sound like, what kind of keywords, where they come from, where those leads come from to give us the right kind of stuff. So I know that's what you do a lot of in structure. It sounds like it's hard to do. It really isn't. People already have the answers. They just don't have them accumulated into something on a one-pager like what we have them do.
Yeah, and I think another challenge is that they don't. A lot of the restorers have spent so much time in the field doing the work that they haven't gotten really good at unpacking what's in their brain and putting it into a written format so that they can share it with others in a way that will stick long term. And I think that's, when you're writing your goals, the mission, the purpose of your business, the why of your business that's beyond money, that's beyond any one person or community, that deeper why is really hard to articulate if you haven't learned how to write your thoughts down. But when you go through the process that we have and people are able to do that, all of a sudden the entire team is like, got it. Okay, I'm 100% on board with that. That is what we do, and that is why I'm here. Right. So getting all those things down, those really fundamental things down, is important.
If you don't state those things, that you won't attract the kind of people that want to do that. I'm reading that book right now. This is Marketing by Seth Godin, and he said, there's a phrase, he says, people, and he's talking about when you, like what you want to say externally to your client, your community, people like us do things like this. Like this is how we do it. So I only want people who want to do it that way, because that's the kind of success we feel like. So, but if you don't have it tangible, written, visible, then you can't attract more people. You'll attract people that have all these different ideas of the kind of business they want to work in based on their personality type. So that can get real messy. And that's where, then you get into scaling and after your structure and your systems.
So step number 2 in the process is creating scalable systems before you expand. If your processes are broken at 500,000, they're going to collapse at 5 million. Well, they'll probably collapse at 1 million. But it's so important that you create those scalable systems so that you can delegate properly and that you can have the desired outcome that your customers have come to know you by, even though you're not the one necessarily performing them. Documenting your key SOPs and things along those lines before you bring on more employees is going to help you train them. And then having scorecards, accountability systems, and things like that so that you can have follow-up meetings with your team and you can create a culture that's collaborative and it's not a dictatorship, is how I say it.
Yes.
A lot of these old school restorers are very much about, just do it my way.
Yeah.
If you just do this, you'll be fine. Well, yes, but in today's world, collaboration is very much valued in the workspace. So, having these things in place is going to foster that.
And people have a lot more options of places to work than they used to. So, nobody wants to work on that. Toby, let's get granular for just a minute. What are one of these SOPs and processes? I know we talk a lot about if you can't do it at 500,000, it's going to really crush you at 5 million. What's one of those that if it's not done right, that it's not going to stand the weather of growth? Well,
an easy one to pick on, we created one for some attendees of an event that we did. Let's see, it was early 2024, I guess. It was a comms plan, right? We wanted the attendees of the event to put this in place in their business so that when they got to the event, they wouldn't be up and down constantly trying to have conversations with their team and answering questions. In order to remove yourself from the bottleneck, you've got to tell them how to succeed without calling you constantly. We don't want you to be Google of your business. Yeah. You shouldn't be Google of your business. But that's one area that you will absolutely be crippled in your life outside of work if you don't establish a proper comms plan with the right people in place to answer the questions without you being present.
Yeah, I think the comms plans, besides going to a conference, what about transitioning from mitigation to construction? So let's just say you're doing an average of 1 to 3 jobs a week, but you're growing, you found a new referral partner, and that's going to jump to 5 to 7. Well, if you're having a hard time with transitioning from construction over to your mitigation to your construction with just 1 to 3 jobs, imagine when you now, unless you just really are growing great people, it's going to be worse. You're going to have not 2 customers unhappy with communications. You're going to have 7. And then that's going to grow into 10 or 11. And then it's just going to be just a world. So those are the kinds of scalable or non-scalable processes we're talking about. How you invoice a job, who documents what,
cash flow.
Cash flow. It's your everything. If you can't invoice quick enough when you do hit the busier season or those surges, your cash flow is going to cripple. And it didn't matter to be busy, or you wish you weren't busy then because now you're broke because now you're funding everything with no cash flow coming in. So that's really good. That scorecard really changes a lot. Scorecard gets you away from the P&L, doesn't it, Toby? It's more of almost a real time. Like let's address this issue on the second week of April instead of waiting until midway through May or almost in June before we look at what the accountant whipped out for us from something that happened a month and a half ago. So those scorecards can tell a better story.
Yeah, having a weekly scorecard with the right metrics is absolutely crucial. A P&L is considered a lagging metric. Having learning to look at leading metrics and learning to understand what a leading metric is, and really dialing those in will really help you understand before you even get to the end of the month what the P&L might say, right?
Yeah.
Things like learning how to track leads coming in. Your inspection rate, well, inspection to lead tells you how well your office staff is doing, right?
Yeah.
How good are they at setting appointments to lock these, to give our PMs or whoever's the first responder the opportunity to lock these jobs in. Then looking at your close rate in terms of the jobs that you inspect. So there's a ratio there in each one of those that's going to give you an indicator of how well your team is doing. So yeah, those are all leading metrics that'll help you figure out before the month end even comes where you can expect the P&L to show some of the numbers. So,
well, and to bring this all back in, to make sure those that are listening and watching at home or in their car, we're still talking about the topic was bigger is not always better. If you don't have all these in place when you're 500, 400 to 600, it's not crippling. But if you don't start to build it then at 2 million, at 4 million, at 5, of course, and on up, it's absolutely required. And you're probably going to see 0 or very, very low profit margins, and you're going to be kind of upside down. And your cash won't be king. Cash will be the joker because you won't see it.
yeah.
So I want to make sure we're saying bigger businesses can be better, but without these things we're talking about, they're just a whole lot of bullshit. They're just chaos. And Toby, I know you hear this a lot. I know people that hate their business. They absolutely, they don't look forward to it. They wish that somebody would come along and write them a big old check, or wish that a fire would happen and take it from them so they could do an insurance cash out, because it grows into something that is out of control. That doesn't have, it worked at 600,000, even may have worked at $1 million. But once you added more people, more divisions, it just got to be too much, man. So
Yeah.
Toby, let's start sending people packing here and talk about when does it make sense for someone to scale? Like, and again, maybe it's hard to say I want to be a $5.5 million a year company. I will tell people it's hard to stop growth if you figured out the levers, if you figured out good lead gen. So it's they say it's dangerous to stay in one place because your competition is always coming after you. But what do you have to say about when is it the right time to scale up and not scale up?
Yeah. So there's 3 actual indicators that you're ready to grow. One is your business is running without you having to be a micromanager, or your business runs without you, micromanager or not. I think there's a sweet spot in between there. When you're in growth mode and you're fairly new, maybe into the business, you're having to kind of be all things to all people until you're able to put the pieces in. And on some level, you're a micromanager, maybe by default. And at times that's probably okay. But, like in the case of Nick's been on our podcast a couple of times. Nick said that his first aha moment was when he came back from a summer long or a month long vacation, and he had one envelope on his desk, one piece of mail.
Right.
That's a good sign that, that you're ready to grow. Another thing is your margins are solid and predictable. If you can get your business to where the margins are very consistent month over month, no matter what type of work you're doing, no matter how busy you get or how slow you get, if you can get to a point where your profit margins are solid and predictable, you're probably ready to grow and scale. The third thing is you've got a playbook. You have some documented systems that a new team can follow. Or you've got somebody that can administer the training because the playbook is in place. And that will alleviate you from the process. So I think if any one of those 3 things are in play, you're probably in a good spot to start thinking about scaling. If you've got all 3 of those things in place, I'd say you're probably pretty close to rocking and rolling.
I wanted to hit your second topic. Your margins are solid and predictable. Our industry, being as inconsistent as it is from seasonality and things like that, depending on where you're on the country, you might have drastic winters or not. rainy seasons. Our industry seems to be very reactive, saying, I don't have consistent and solid margins. Sometimes I do, but more times I'm not. But they have us saying like, well, we lost money on that job, but we'll try to make it up on the next one. That's not a good plan. You need to have such control over while we're running it. And that's why we love T&M. I love T&M billing instead of Xactimate by creating an estimate after we're finished, which is an invoice. Is let's just find as many line items as we can to make sure we get to the number that matches how much we spent to do the job. That's really a backwards way to do it. The best way to do it is saying, when I scope this job, when I budget this job, I've got it built in for 3 people, total of 24 hours. If we're going beyond that, there probably is a change order we need to get. That's solid and consistent. That way, at the end of the job, you can say, well, we're within that. I wanted a gross margin between 60 and 75, and we're right there. Or then a net margin is, I want to be somewhere between 25 or 22 and 28 or 30 or so. Not just leave it up to chance. And I watch a lot of people, if you're still doing that, and there's nothing more disheartening, Toby, when you or I get a call from a client that we're still trying to figure out some basic issues like that. And they say, hey, I've got a great opportunity. I'm going to open a contents division. And I'm like, well, what about the failing mitigation division? Does that not deserve your attention? No, but this is going to fix that. This is not going to fix it. This is going to compound it.
Yeah. Well, my favorite is I'll leave the name out, but the favorite plumbing company that a lot of restorers are adding onto their business, when goodness knows that the restoration business is in shambles, but they feel like adding a plumbing company bolting on to their existing is going to provide them with more. It's a mess. Listen, there's people out there that have done it. They've done it very successfully, but it's because they had a business that didn't require them in it. They had margins that were solid and predictable, and they had documented systems that a team could follow. Then you can bolt on a plumbing company. But that's not the play that we see the majority of the time on social media and Toby, through the conversations that we have.
Toby, let's link down in the description. Let's link the podcast that we did. Now, if someone has seen them all, great. But if you didn't catch an earlier podcast about 3 episodes ago, we talked about the mindset between technician and owner. While you need both, we see businesses succeed more from people who think more in a business sense. They don't necessarily always do better work. So if you're a technician and you say, I want my containment to be impenetrable, well, you might have somebody beat there, but you're only going to do 1 or 2 jobs at a time. Listening to this entire conversation, Chris, listening to this entire conversation, Toby, I was trying to find an example of someone that we know personally, and this was a coaching client for just not a long time, that when I first met this person, again, leaving the name out, true person, great guy, I went to his business and he had 6 kids, good marriage, but man, it was tough. He was torn because he was never there, but he had his mitigation and recon company. He had a kind of like a quasi PA firm attached to it. And then he bought another remodeling company, and he was running all of these, and none of them were producing enough profit to make it worth it. And he had me up for 2-3 days, and he told me, tell me the truth. And I said, you need to burn some of them. You need to do what, like Kevin O'Leary says, take it out behind the barn, figure out which one's going to go on the burn list, and just drop it. I said, well, I've got money into it. I know you got money into it, but you're not making any money. So you're not going to lose anything other than the sunk cost that you think that you've got to keep pouring into it. Yeah. Fast forward 2 years. I heard from him and he said, Clark, I'm back to just doing GC. It's what I do well. I've got myself and 3 employees. We have 4-day work weeks. I have every weekend. My guys have 3 days a week. We're making as much or more money than ever. Customers are happy. I'm able to attain and appease everybody. He said, I don't have to worry about who's calling me to complain. He goes, the best thing I ever did was do less. And I hope that is a good lesson for some people. that's the life he wanted. He didn't want a big business. He wanted a business that would serve his life. And the one he had built or fallen into or quasi constructed didn't serve that. And he had to, I eventually said, you're not going to lose anything by dropping some of these. You're going to actually gain. And it didn't feel like it, but I was happy that he trusted us. I mean, I don't know if I would have trusted me if I'd put in $500,000 into all these businesses that none of them were creating anything but gray hairs. And I just loved getting that call from him and him telling me where he was now and, vacations with the family and the kids. And it was really cool. And I hope that anyone listening says, I can see that. Just remember, bigger is an ego thing. People, if someone's saying, they go to a conference, RA, and someone walks up to me and says, how big is your company? I'm going to tell them $3 trillion. I mean, it doesn't matter. Does
right? Yeah. I
mean, how about this? I'm here in at RA next week in West Palm. I'm here and nobody's calling me. My team has it down pat. We're making money. The jobs are getting done. Not like I'm here walking the halls, like you said, no comms plan. I'm walking the halls, paint color choices, unhappy customers, scheduling jobs, inspections. Nobody's on call. That's adjusters. Not a business. That's not adjusters. That's not a business. That's not a business. That's a job. Yeah. And that, by the way, the RA is not going to help you with that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why, going back to what we said earlier, just to kind of start recapping and winding this thing down, I think that's why defining success on your own terms is so important. You've got to look beyond the money. Again, I can speak. I did this myself. You've got to look beyond the money and realize that success is not revenue. Success isn't necessarily profit. It's the freedom, sustainability, and the personal fulfillment that you get and that your business contributes to. There's a few questions that every owner should be asking before they decide to expand. Do I actually want a bigger business, or do I want a better business? Kind of to what you just said. Will this growth improve my lifestyle, or is it going to make things more stressful? I put it into terms of accounting. Is this growth going to be an asset to my life, or is it going to be a liability? And then what am I willing to sacrifice in order to achieve that growth? Mm-hmm. On the flip side of that, what am I not willing to sacrifice? I tell all of my clients, especially in the 2-day on-site visits that I do, what are you willing to do to achieve your goal? And what are you willing to stop doing? Because you can build a $10 million business from scratch in a year or less, but you've got to give up a lot to achieve that. You have to probably take, unless you've made millions and millions of dollars elsewhere, you're probably going to have to take out some loans. You're going to have to get some investors. Well, now you're beholden to them. And if you don't have the acumen to support it and sustain it, that's quite a stressful gig at the end of a year when you're not achieving the goals that you had set out to achieve. So, lots of things, soul searching should be done before you actually decide to expand. That you go big, right? Bigger isn't always better.
Toby, when I used to do on-sites with customers, one thing I would say is go ask your kids what they think about your busy business. Ask them if they carry how big your business is. I think when we think about trying to scale big companies, now some people do have financial gain. Some people are scaling just fine, and they know what the cost and the sacrifice is. Sacrifice.
Yep.
But then, you can have a plan, and this industry is changing so fast. Your plan was great for when it was like that, but now it's not. Now your plan of 5 years is running to 12 and 13. For those watching, I'm going to put something on the screen reel now, and those that are listening to this, you're not going to be able to see the visual, but there's a guy that Toby and I follow on LinkedIn. His name is Justin Welsh, and I just pulled up one of his. He does daily LinkedIn posts, and he is all about growing a profitable business. And this one says, the happiest people I know aren't chasing big houses and fancy cars. They're building tiny businesses that let them work 3 to 4 hours a day and spend the rest of their time actually living life. Imagine if you could imagine if you are the owner of ABC Restoration in Little Rock, Arkansas, and you came in the morning at 10 and worked till 12:30, and all you did was hit each one of your, not hit literally, but talk to each one of your managers and said, what, you have a scorecard, you review it with them, you sit in a leadership meeting, but that's your input. You meet with the marketing team, you meet with the accounting team, they get an hour of your time, and you're done. Now, maybe that's go play golf, maybe that's go pick up your kids from school, have lunch with the wife, walk in the park, maybe you go do hot yoga. I don't know, but imagine if that was your job and you got out of the way. That would be cool. But Justin Welsh, LinkedIn, has been inspiring for us to continue, for Toby and I and the rest of our team to know we're on the right path. Don't get wrapped up in thinking that other people are watching you grow your business and they're expecting you to get this big. No one else really cares. They care about their business, not yours. So don't get in that trap, right? Nobody really cares how big your business is. If they do, let them come help work for you and they can help you run it and make a little bit of a salary. But
yeah, exactly. One thing I learned when I was young, tied into what you said, is nobody cares. Nobody cares. Do what's best for you and ignore the noise. Ignore the voices in your head.
Toby, my grandfather, we've talked about my grandfather before. You've got some great family stories, but my grandfather, my dad's side, he sold John Deere tractors for 62 years. And he rode around the country in an S10 and a Silverado always a Chevy. And when I was young, riding with him, it seemed like the most boring, empty, dusty roads, empty work, sitting and talking to farmers. And I'm like, I didn't say, Papa, hey, what do? You know what he told me, Toby? He told me one time, and when I was old enough to understand this, I was probably about 12 or 13. He goes, I kind of like that nobody knows who I am except my customers, but I help them feed millions of people every single day. So what's your impact?
Strong.
Yeah. And he told me, he goes, I help these people with combines and tractors and spreaders and tillers and things like that helps them produce cattle for, whatever it is that they do to feed millions of people. And he goes, I don't need people to know that I do it. I know that I do it. And that's always been something I carried with me, man.
That's strong.
It was, I wish he was still around. He would, I'd get him on this podcast, man. He'd probably tear it up. Awesome. I'd have to put not safe for work, man. He talked like a farmer. They did not go clean, and he did not go politically correct on politics either. So, hey, Tobe, let's, where could everybody, this is a self-serving sponsorship here. Where could everybody come and meet us in June and help work on what this might look like?
Whitefish, Montana. Our annual Montana business retreat. Go see the Glacier National Park and the glaciers in Montana. Beautiful, amazing.
Yeah.
Now I'm really excited about this one. It's going to be, I don't want to say low key because it's not going to be low key, but it's going to be very unstructured in a way that's going to foster some powerful conversations. We've done it with another group, and it was so strong, and that's why we wanted to bring that format to Montana with us this year. So link will be in the description below. You have a VIP option where it's all inclusive, and it's going to be epic either way. Whitefish is, I think, probably my new favorite spot. I even think I would pick that over Hawaii. Sorry to my buddies in Hawaii, but man, Montana's phenomenal.
How about both? You can still have both. Toby, okay. I will tell you, it's not coincidence that we've kind of sculpted these retreats this way. I go to a lot of conferences and events where when I come home, I need a couple of days to rest. We're creating something where you come back super clear. There's not a whole lot of sponsors. You're not the schedule's not cram packed with, you got 5 minutes here, run to this. This is calm and casual, but powerful, real small, low key, less than 30 people, other business owners that, we've got it priced. I think it's a fair price, but it will keep out a lot of people who don't see the value investing in themselves. So you're going to have true action takers that either have scaled or are still scaling or just wanting to ask you how you would do it. I know that a lot of our people that have attended in the past, or some of them are coming back, and they all stay in touch with each other. Some of them have visited each other, and I know we've said that on some of this, but some of our past Montana retreat guys and gals visit each other. They plan a little trip around it. One goes to another one, says, hey, I'm going to come see how your business operates, and I'll bring the fam, blah, blah, blah. So we're not sold out yet. It will sell out, especially the closer we get to it. I know our industry kind of like waits to see what, storms and weather and all these kind of things are. But before you know it, you're going to blink and it's going to be out and the rooms are going to be gone. But if running a business where you can actually breathe and not wake up every morning with like a huge to-do list is on your list of goals, then I invite you, Toby invites you to come out and meet with us, because I will promise you a bigger business is not better unless you just want to say, I own a big business. But most people that have scaled a big one have say, I was happier. I was just as wealthy. I was just as satisfied at half the size, or back when I was a third of this size or something like that. So
well, to take it one step further, we've even had people call us and tell us that they wouldn't have lost their marriage if they had stayed small. So, or stayed profitable. That's the key. Well, marriage, small is relative, profit is relative, but sacrificing your family on the altar of success is not where it's at. Well,
marriages, I've seen drug abuse, alcohol abuse, I've seen mental health issues. It all creeps in. It's not uncommon, but maybe those things were already there and the business just made it worse. But don't let this business that we're running mess with the thing that you can't replace. A business can be replaced. A family cannot. Yourself cannot. So, man, I hope that this creates some conversations in yourself. If you want to have them with us, drop us a comment, reach out to us on restorationadvisors.com. Listen, it doesn't have to turn into anything. It could just be like, listen, I gave somebody 20, 30 minutes the other day. He said, hey, what do I owe you? I said, tell a friend. Leave me a review. But this is what we do, because that person just got a whole lot of clarity around something that wasn't even a big deal. So maybe this podcast, today's version, will, if you've been chasing big, maybe you'll just chase better. Yep. Good stuff. All right. Take care. Peace.